Ladies and gentlemen, today we revisit a moment in Washington that turned a simple hearing into a powerful lesson about respect, sacrifice, and history. The story begins with Senator Tommy Tuberville, a man who rose to fame not in politics, but on the football field. He coached, he motivated players, he stood on the sidelines of games cheered by thousands. But when he entered the Senate, he brought with him not just the voice of a coach, but the confidence of a man who believes he can laugh at anyone and still win the game. Across from him sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a name that in recent years has grown in strength, known for her sharp questioning, her quick wit, and above all, her fearlessness. Crockett is not the kind of lawmaker who stays quiet when dismissed. She challenges, she pushes back, and she often turns moments of mockery into moments of truth. The committee room that day was tense. Papers shuffled, cameras were rolling, senators whispered, waiting for the fireworks. And then it happened. Tuberville leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and as Jasmine spoke, he let out a laugh. Not a polite chuckle, a laugh filled with arrogance, a laugh that said, "You don't matter. Your words are just noise." He followed with a jab. "Congresswoman, you always dramatize things too much." The words were casual, but the tone was cutting. Some in the room smirked, others nodded. In that instant, it looked as though Tuberville had set the tone, reducing Jasmine Crockett's voice to a punchline. But Crockett was not shaken. She did not respond with anger. She did not throw back insults. Instead, she reached calmly into her folder and pulled out an old, carefully folded piece of paper. Her eyes were steady, her voice calm. She said, "Senator, let me read you something. Not my words, my father's words. Words he wrote as a young soldier in Vietnam." The laughter stopped. The smirks faded. The room shifted from entertainment to silence. She unfolded the letter, its paper worn with time, and, with the dignity of a daughter honoring her father, she began to read. "We fight not for politics, not for fame. We fight because the next generation deserves dignity and truth." Simple words, yet in that chamber they carried a weight no debate could match. These were not crafted talking points, not party slogans. They were the raw, unfiltered thoughts of a man on the battlefield, a man who risked his life for ideals greater than himself. Jasmine paused, letting the words sink in. Then she closed the letter, looked directly at Tuberville, and declared, "This is not drama, Senator. This is sacrifice. My father's sacrifice." The silence that followed was heavier than any speech. Tuberville, once so quick to laugh, sat motionless. His grin vanished. His voice was gone. The man who had mocked now searched for words, but there were none. In that moment, power shifted. The authority in the room no longer belonged to the senator with the loud laugh. It belonged to the Congresswoman with a letter. And that is where the lesson lies. Politics is often filled with noise, arguments, sarcasm, sound bites designed for television. But beneath all of it, real stories remain. Stories of soldiers who bled for their country. Stories of families who carried that pain for generations. Stories that cannot be laughed away. Jasmine Crockett reminded not just Tommy Tuberville, but the entire room of what leadership should look like. Leadership is not measured by how loud you laugh at your opponents. It is measured by how deeply you honor the sacrifices that built the nation you serve. Think about it. How often do we see leaders mock, belittle, and reduce serious issues into moments of comedy? How often do they forget that behind every policy, every debate, there are real lives and real sacrifices? Crockett's letter was a reminder that politics is temporary, but sacrifice is eternal. For Tuberville, that day became a mirror, a reflection he could not laugh away. He may have entered the hearing with a smirk, but he left it with silence, because silence sometimes is the loudest response of all. So what does this mean for us? It means that as citizens, as voters, as people who care about the future, we must look beyond the laughter, beyond the sarcasm, beyond the shallow games of politics. We must ask, who among our leaders truly carries the weight of sacrifice? Who honors the truth even when it is uncomfortable? Jasmine Crockett spoke not as a politician seeking applause, but as a daughter protecting her father's legacy. That is what gave her words power. That is why Tuberville could not answer, because against truth, arrogance has no defense. Ladies and gentlemen, history is not written by those who laugh the loudest. It is written by those who remind us what matters most. On that day, in that hearing, the voice of history came not from a senator's mockery, but from a soldier's letter, carried through the voice of his daughter. And as we close this chapter, remember this: politics will always have its moments of drama, but true power does not come from laughter. It comes from sacrifice, honor, and the courage to speak truth in the face of mockery. That is the kind of leadership worth listening to. That is the kind of leadership worth following.